welcome back to e-learning with Mr. Pero, and today we're learning about everybody. Life cycle of a star. Now, it sounds kind of funny, life cycle of a star, but yes, stars do have a life. Now, some stars have life. Other stars are just weird. You know, like the people I just watched this crazy movie. Get it? Okay, what's very fun? I got another joke for you. Don't worry, this lesson will be out of this world. I know things are here all day. Well, technically I'm stuck here till whenever we could, whenever the government lets us out. But anyway, so today we're going to look at life cycle of a star. Life cycle of a star. Now, it's pretty simple. Just like us as adults or us as humans, we all have a life cycle. We are born, we grow old, and then we die. It's called the circle of life, right? It's a cycle. A cycle is round. We get born, we die. We born, we die. It's kind of morbid, but that's what it is. So today, we're going to look at a star. Now, most people know what stars are. They're the bright things in the sky when you look up. They form constellations, and they're really pretty to look at. But they're actually extremely dangerous. What are stars? Well, stars are balls of burning gas. That's basically what it is. So today we're going to look at a couple of questions. We're going to look at kind of two different types of stars. We have our high mass stars and our low mass stars. And that's what we're going to look at today. So first off, let's talk about stars. How are they formed? Good question. Good question, right? So first off, our first step is where life begins is what we call the interstellar medium. Right? The interstellar medium. This is basically, the interstellar medium is basically where all the gases, everything kind of collects. It's almost like a giant cloud of dust and gases that mix together. Now, when they mix together, they begin to slowly, what we call, compact, right? When they compact, they begin then to get like a denser cloud, is what we call a nebula. Now, a nebula is basically what we call basically the star nursery. It's where stars are really, really formed. Right, so this is like the star nursery. It's a star nursery. A star nursery. From a nebula, this is again where all those gases compact, all the dust, they really get squeezed from the gravitational pull, things like that. And this is when all those kind of mix and match together, even denser, they become what we call a protostar. A protostar, now I want you to think about this, a protostar is like what we call kind of that baby, when that baby's being formed inside. So if we compare it to life, it's like a baby being developed in a mother's womb, right? So this is kind of where when we're inside the belly or inside the womb of our mother. This is all the gases are put together. They're really dense, they're tight, and gravity's pushing them together, and basically they begin to change. And now this light begins to change, and then, of course, what is born? This is when a star is born, right? This is where they get discovered on American Idol. Right? Okay, bad joke, right? It's a star is born. This is basically, what is a star? Well, a star is a ball of gas, and certain types of gas, it's the ball of hydrogen. It's a ball of hydrogen. Now this hydrogen is what we call fusing. Fusing is where they kind of being pushed together and it's changing. When it fuses together, it's fusing into what we call helium. So it's going from hydrogen to helium. And helium is the stuff we love to put in our balloons. Hi guys, how's it going? So, but a lot on a greater scale, right? And so we have this. So we start with the interstellar medium. That's where it starts being developed. A nebula, that's where it really starts being developed. A protostar is all stuff put together. And then when all of it's compact so far, boom, a star is formed. And a star is basically a ball of gas that's turning hydrogen and fusing it into helium, right? And all of these start in sequences. It moves to a different place, and it moves to what we call the main sequence. The main sequence is basically main sequence. This is where most stars spend their time, in the main sequence. We will go over this in our next section. So let me erase my board and restart, and I'll see you in about a second. And we're back. It's a quick second, wasn't it? So we talked about the main sequence. So now we're in this main sequence. This is where most stars spend their life. Now, depending on where you are and how big you are, the mass of it will depend on your life cycle. Now, there's a high mass star and a low mass star. So today, right now, I actually want to focus on what we call a low mass star. An example of a low mass star, I'm going to draw you a picture. A low mass star is an example. So we go through all of our stars, interstellar into a protostar, boom. Now we have our star. And our star today, what we're going to talk about, is a star we all know and love. We saw it today. The light makes wish was a little bit warmer, but we're going to talk about our sun. Right, our sun is a low mass star. In the main sequence, it's been in the main sequence, right? It'll spend about 10 billion years in this. So we got about 5 billion years left. 5 billion years left in the main sequence. I forgot to tell you something. Now, these low mass stars can actually spend 80 to 100 billion years, billion years in the main sequence. So it takes them a lot longer. They mature a lot slower than high mass stars will get back. So we have our low mass star. We start as the sun. It's been there about 5 billion, about 5 billion to go. So let's say that 5 billion goes farther. It gets older. So after that 5 billion years, we start changing. And we start changing into a red giant. Now, a red giant is, like it said, it's blue. Just kidding. It's red. Okay? It's a red giant. Now, this red giant, such as Betelgeuse, is basically much bigger than our sun, our kind of our main, our medium-sized star. It gets larger, and let's think about this. When our sun turns into a red giant about 5 billion years, we'll all be long gone dead, and that star will actually consume the first three, Mercury, Venus, Earth. So we'll be fine anyways. So it turns into a red giant. Now the red giant will fizzle out and become what we call a planetary nebula. Right? A planetary nebula, all that gas and stuff like that, then what begins to happen is from a planetary nebula, it goes into what we call a white dwarf. So a white dwarf, so I'm going to kind of draw a picture here. So we have our planetary nebula, kind of our gases, and white dwarf is kind of like the core of that nebula. And that is very small, it is very bright, and it's incredibly dense. Dense means packed tightly together. And it is 350,000 times the gravity of Earth. So think about that, 350,000 times the gravity of Earth. That's how dense it is. And from the white dwarf, that really kind of, it's like its last breath of life before it dies. Now, the low mass stars, to be honest, the low mass stars are like a Lifetime movie. It's got that, there's no action. It's like I don't even know. It's some talk show. The boring talk shows nobody likes. It's just they talk. They're really nice to each other. It kind of fizzles out like that. It goes from a white dwarf, and let's say it burns, and then it becomes what we call a black dwarf. A black dwarf. And we don't actually see black dwarf. We don't actually see a black dwarf because it no longer produces light. And the light you see, right, we talk about light speed, right, or the light years and how fast it is. There's no longer light. It's no more emitting the light, which means it's dead. So when it dies, it's done, and it becomes a black dwarf. And the black dwarf, I could draw it. It's done. It's donezo. It's death. So that's the cycle of a low mass star. We go from a main sequence star, a medium star, a regular star, to a red giant, from red giant to planetary nebula. From planetary nebula, on its last back comes a white dwarf, and then from white dwarf it comes a black dwarf, and then it just fizzles out and disappears, right? So stay tuned. We're going to come back to the Jerry Springer show of stars in a second. All right? Let me erase my board, and I'll be right back. And we're back. Welcome back for some more knowledge, right? So today, we're going to finish off with high mass stars. Think about high mass stars as this is like the Jerry Springer show of stars. Like Jerry, the crazy star. This is like the crazy uncle star that always gets in trouble and does all that. Like, we all have that crazy person in our lives. So think about this. A high mass star is much different than a low mass star. First off, the first difference is that unlike the low mass star that spends 80 to 100 billion years in the main sequence, a high mass star only spends about 20 million. 20 million years in, I sound 20 million years like it's nothing, but 20 million years in the main sequence. Now, it starts as, just like I said, in the main sequence star. But from the main sequence star, it goes and it becomes something much bigger. It becomes a red, not red giant, a red supergiant. A red supergiant. Now, what's the difference between a red giant and a red supergiant? Well, it's super. It's much, much, much bigger than a red giant. It's large. So we have this, our main sequence star, then we become a red supergiant. Now, let's see what high mass stars end in a blaze of glory, right? So think about this. A red giant expands, just like a balloon. It does what? It explodes. And when it explodes, it's what we call a supernova. A supernova. Now, a supernova, just like super red giant, supernova is basically, it's a giant explosion in space, right? It's like an explosion. It's when a star basically runs out of fuel. It collapses. When it collapses, it blows up. They've actually seen, like, you can go actually on the internet and look up a supernova. Right? NASA found one. Now, remember, these stars are billions of light years away, so most stars we already see are already dead, but supernova happens, and it's like you find it. It's somewhere on the internet. Find it, and it's really cool to look at. But it's like an explosion. It's an explosion, right? It explodes. Now, in this explosion, it can go two different ways. The first way, you kind of have the leftovers of the explosion. That's what we call a neutron star. Oh, that's a neutron. Oh my gosh. Don't boo me again, please. Like last time. Don't boo me. Stop booing. Right? A neutron star. Neutron. Neutron star. And this neutron star is that very dense. We talk here that word again. Is this very dense. And it's so dense. Think about this. If you all love cooking, you have 1 tablespoon. That little, think about a spoonful. 1 just tablespoon of a neutron star is 1 billion. 1 billion tons. 1 billion, like a billion elephants. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. 1 billion, right? So, right, right? So you got this. You got the explosion to a neutron star that is so dense 1 teaspoon is equal to 1 billion. Or you have what everybody knows and loves, a black hole. Now this black hole is what it is. A black hole is really cool. They say that there's a black hole in the middle of our galaxy, in our Milky Way galaxy, right? A black hole. Black hole. Right? And the black hole is what it said, it's black. Now the reason why it's so black is because the gravity in a black hole is so strong that not even light can escape. You literally see, if you look at like through a telescope, you would just see darkness. Right? It is so strong. It can pull in stars, it can pull in planets, it can pull entire galaxies. I mean, not entire galaxies, but it can pull. But it's pretty. Look at the PowerPoint; you'll see artist rendition. But anyways, so that is your basic kind of high mass stars versus low mass stars. Remember, low mass stars, you have a main sequence star, red giant, planetary nebula, white dwarf, black dwarf, and then for high mass stars, you start with your regular, your high mass sequence star, main sequence star, to super red giant, to a supernova, to a neutron star, or to a black hole. So hopefully you learned something today. Go back to the PowerPoint now, take a look at all your stuff, and be prepared for your quiz on Wednesday when we meet. Miss ya. We love you. Miss Romero and myself, I was on the phone with her today. She says hello as well. You've all talked to her. But we miss you. We love you. And I hope you do awesome. And remember, I flexed and the sleeves fell off. I mean, I didn't really flex. I don't want my sleeves to actually come off. So, all right, guys. I love you. And I will see you later. Goodbye.